You won't believe how far some people will go to get their way. It started with a few harmless complaints, then escalated into something unthinkable. My flower farm, my livelihood, was under attack. And the culprit? None other than the most notorious HOA dictator in town, Karen. She thought she could kill my business and get away with it. But what she didn't expect was that I would take the fight all the way to court, and that her downfall would be far more spectacular than she ever imagined. Stick around, because this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about justice, karma, and the ultimate HOA takedown. And trust me, the way this ends will leave you speechless. Hey, before we dive into this roller coaster of a story, do me a quick favor. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. It might seem like a small thing, but it helps get these jaw-dropping HOA nightmares in front of more people. And while you're at it, smash that like button and hit subscribe. It only takes a second, but for me, it makes all the difference. Trust me, this Karen saga is about to go off the rails, and you'll want a front row seat. My name's Ethan Carter, and my flower farm was more than just a business. It was my dream, my legacy, my entire world. I inherited this land from my grandmother, a woman with a heart as nurturing as the soil she tended. From the time I could walk, she taught me the delicate art of horticulture, showing me how each petal, each leaf, each root had a story to tell. Every morning, as the golden sun stretched across the fields, I stood in awe of the rows of vibrant tulips, fragrant roses, and rare orchids that I had grown with my own hands. The scent of fresh earth, the soft rustling of leaves in the morning breeze, these were the things that made life feel complete. My farm wasn't just a livelihood. It was my sanctuary, a piece of my soul planted in the ground. It was the one place where I felt truly in control of my own destiny, where the worries of the outside world couldn't touch me. But peace, as I would soon learn, can be fleeting. Everything changed the day Karen Whitmore moved into the neighborhood. I had never met anyone quite like her before. Her presence alone was enough to shift the atmosphere. She carried herself like royalty, her nose slightly upturned, her eyes scanning everything with an air of disapproval. It wasn't long before I realized that Karen wasn't just another resident. No, she was the president of the Willow Creek HOA, and she ruled it with an iron fist. The moment she stepped into power, she made it her mission to impose her rigid, suffocating version of perfection on the entire community. Rules were suddenly being enforced more strictly than ever before. Fences had to be the exact height she dictated, lawns had to be cut to the precise length she approved, and even the color of front doors had to align with her ideal aesthetic. At first, I thought I was safe. My farm wasn't even part of the HOA, so why would she bother with me? But I underestimated Karen's obsession with control. To her, it didn't matter that my land had been here long before her pristine, cookie-cutter neighborhood even existed. She believed that everything within eyesight of her beloved community had to conform to her impossible standards. And my farm, the bright colors, the rustic charm, the untamed beauty, stood in stark contrast to the dull, uniform lawns of Willow Creek. To her, it was an eyesore, a blemish on her vision of order and conformity. It was as if the mere presence of something outside her control offended her to her very core. She couldn't stand that my land existed in defiance of her rules, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she tried to do something about it. It started with the looks. Every time I caught Karen walking past my farm, she would slow down, squinting in distaste as if the sight of flowers blooming was somehow offensive. Then came the comments. Passive-aggressive little remarks about how some people didn't take enough pride in their property. It didn't take a genius to know she was talking about me. Then she started dropping hints to my neighbors, subtly trying to turn them against me, planting the idea that my farm was an eyesore and a nuisance. I ignored her at first, figuring she would move on to some other petty complaint. But I was wrong. Karen wasn't the kind of person who let things go. When she set her sights on something, she dug her claws in deep, and she wasn't about to stop until she had her way. The way she saw it, I was defying her authority, and in her mind, that was unacceptable. I should have seen it coming. I should have known that a woman like Karen, someone who thrived on control and thrived on making others bend to her will, wouldn't stop at snide remarks. What started as an inconvenience soon turned into an all-out war. She began filing complaints with the county about supposed violations on my property, all of which were complete nonsense. She claimed that my farm attracted pests, that the colors of my flowers were too distracting, that my dirt driveway was ruining the aesthetic of her neighborhood. And when the complaints didn't get the results she wanted, she escalated even further. Little did I know my peaceful sanctuary was about to become a battleground, and I was about to face the fight of my life. One blistering afternoon, as the sun blazed overhead, Karen strutted onto my property like she was walking into a boardroom she controlled. The audacity in her posture was impossible to miss. Chin lifted high, steps precise and measured, as if the land beneath her belonged to her. She wore an almost comically pristine beige pantsuit, the kind no reasonable person would ever wear to a farm, and clutched a clipboard to her chest like it was some divine decree. The sight alone made my stomach churn. I had heard whispers about her power-hungry antics, but this was the first time I was facing her head-on, and the smug authority radiating from her was enough to make my blood boil before she even opened her mouth. "Mr. Carter," she finally said, her voice coated with syrupy politeness, the kind that made your skin crawl because you just knew it was fake. "I'm here on behalf of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. We've received multiple complaints from our residents regarding your situation here." Her eyes flicked around my farm like it was some sort of offensive eyesore. "Your flower farm is, well, it's quite a concern for our community. The bright colors, the unpaved driveways, it's all rather disruptive to the overall aesthetic, and frankly, it's impacting property values." I almost spit out my iced tea. "Excuse me," I scoffed, barely able to contain my frustration. "This farm has been here long before your HOA even existed." I gestured toward the sprawling fields, vibrant and alive, a testament to my hard work and my grandmother's legacy. "And last I checked, my land isn't part of your fancy little neighborhood." Karen's expression barely wavered, but I caught the flicker of irritation in her eyes. She pressed her lips into a thin smile, tight, forced, and utterly insincere. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with barely concealed condescension, "perhaps it's time for some adjustments. I'm sure as a reasonable person, you can understand that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And right now, our community needs a more uniform, orderly environment." That was Karen's signature move, passive-aggressive threats wrapped in a thin veil of politeness. But I had seen her kind before. She wasn't just talk. She was a woman with an agenda. And something told me that this little visit wasn't a casual chat. No, Karen had a plan, and whether I liked it or not, she was about to put it into motion. A few weeks later, I started noticing something strange. At first it was subtle, just a few drooping leaves here and there, nothing that set off alarms. But within days, entire patches of my once thriving flowers were turning yellow, their petals drying up and crumbling at the slightest touch. My stomach twisted in knots as I walked through my fields, my boots crunching on what should have been soft, vibrant petals. Something was wrong, very wrong. This wasn't a natural problem. This was sabotage. Desperate for answers, I checked everything. I tested the soil, adjusted the watering schedule, and even brought in a local horticulturist to inspect my plants. His verdict? A chemical agent had been introduced, one designed to kill. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone had deliberately poisoned my flowers. My farm, my livelihood, was under attack, and I had no idea who was behind it. The idea of losing everything I had worked so hard for made my blood boil. But anger alone wouldn't solve this. I needed proof. That's when my friend and neighbor Mike stepped in. Mike had lived in the area for years and had dealt with Karen's antics before. When I told him what was happening, his face darkened. "You need cameras," he said flatly. "If someone's doing this on purpose, they'll strike again." The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I wasted no time. That very night, with Mike's help, I installed hidden security cameras around my property, strategically placing them near the most affected areas. I barely slept, anxiety eating away at me, hoping, praying that I'd catch whoever was behind this. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, heart pounding as I checked the footage. My breath hitched as the screen lit up with a grainy night vision recording. And there she was, Karen. Cloaked in darkness, she moved carefully through my fields, a large spray canister strapped to her back. She crouched low, methodically spritzing the flowers row by row, her movements eerily precise. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This was cold, calculated destruction. My fists clenched as I watched her work, a sickening mix of fury and disbelief washing over me. This wasn't just some HOA dispute. This was personal. She was killing my business, my passion, my dreams. But she made one crucial mistake. She underestimated me. I wasn't going to confront her in a fit of rage. No, I had something better in mind. I was going to make sure she paid for what she did. And this footage? This was my golden ticket to justice. I gathered every shred of evidence I could find. Security footage showing Karen sneaking onto my property in the dead of night. The heartbreaking images of my once thriving flowers reduced to lifeless stems, and expert reports confirming that the chemical used was deliberately chosen to kill my plants. My lawyer and I meticulously prepared our case, confident that justice would be served. As I walked into the courtroom, I felt an unshakable determination. This wasn't just about my flower farm. It was about standing up against the unchecked power of Karen and her corrupt HOA. But what I didn't know was that she had one last dirty trick up her sleeve. The moment Karen walked in, she played the victim like a seasoned actress. Her designer outfit was perfectly chosen to make her look respectable, and her eyes glistened with manufactured tears. She clutched her pearls dramatically as she told the court her fabricated story, claiming that she had merely been trying to maintain the property line and had no idea that the chemicals she used would harm my flowers. Her lawyer, an expensive, smug-looking man, nodded along as if she were some saint being unfairly persecuted. But what made my blood boil was when she pointed at me with a trembling hand, saying I was turning the neighborhood against her with false accusations. I could see some jury members shifting in their seats. Some were skeptical of her act, while others seemed unsure. My lawyer presented the undeniable evidence, the video footage, the expert testimonies, and even reports from other neighbors who had suffered from Karen's antics. For a moment, I thought we had it. I thought the case was airtight. But then something strange happened. The judge barely looked at the evidence. He nodded passively at my lawyer's arguments, then quickly turned his attention back to Karen's lawyer. It was as if he had already made up his mind before the trial had even begun. What I didn't know at the time, what would become clear only after the trial, was that Karen had used her deep pockets to influence the outcome. A few hushed conversations, a couple of well-placed favors, and suddenly she had the judge in her back pocket. The jury's skepticism didn't matter anymore. Even though a few of them cast doubtful glances her way, the judge disregarded their concerns. With an almost dismissive wave, he declared that there wasn't enough clear intent to prove she had deliberately sabotaged my farm. Just like that, Karen walked free while I stood there, stunned, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. Karen didn't even bother hiding her smirk as she exited the courtroom. She had won this round, and she wanted me to know it. She tossed me a fake sympathetic glance and mouthed the words, "Better luck next time." But as much as my blood boiled, as much as I wanted to scream at the injustice of it all, I knew this wasn't over. Karen thought she had won. She thought her money and manipulation would keep her safe. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't the type to roll over and accept defeat. No, this was just the beginning, and I was going to make sure she regretted ever setting foot on my land. With my lawyer's help, we filed for a stay of execution and appealed the decision. In simple terms, that meant the court's initial ruling in Karen's favor wouldn't be enforced until a higher court reviewed the case. If we had accepted the first verdict, I would have been forced to pay damages, and Karen would have walked away victorious. But by filing for the stay, we bought time to fight back properly. It was a legal way of saying, "Hold on a second, we're not done yet." It was also a crucial move because it prevented Karen from taking any further action against me while we worked to overturn the decision. The appeal process was grueling. My lawyer and I knew we had to go all in, leaving no stone unturned. We spent weeks meticulously building our case, gathering undeniable proof that Karen had deliberately sabotaged my farm. Security footage clearly captured her sneaking onto my property under the cover of darkness, armed with a spray canister filled with chemicals. She wasn't just careless. She had a plan, methodically targeting rows of my flowers, ensuring maximum destruction. We obtained expert testimony from horticulturists who confirmed that the plants didn't die due to natural causes. This was an act of calculated malice, but what truly turned the tide was the testimony from my neighbors. One by one, they bravely stepped forward, sharing their own horror stories about Karen's reign of terror. She had fined people for trivial things, threatened legal action over minor infractions, and wielded the HOA like a weapon. As the evidence stacked up, it became clear Karen wasn't just a nuisance, she was a tyrant who had finally pushed too far. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Karen entered with her usual air of superiority, her expensive lawyer at her side. But there was something different this time, a crack in her armor. The confident smirk she usually wore wavered as she caught sight of my legal team, my neighbors, and the overwhelming evidence stacked against her. As proceedings began, her lawyer did everything in his power to twist the narrative. Karen claimed she was simply trying to enforce community beautification standards and had no ill intent. But as the security footage played, showing her spraying chemicals in the dead of night, her story fell apart. The judge's expression hardened. Then my lawyer presented damning emails, messages from Karen to other HOA members, instructing them to file false complaints against my farm to build a case for shutting it down. The gasps in the courtroom were audible. Karen wasn't just overstepping her authority, she was orchestrating a full-scale attack on my livelihood. The trial stretched on for weeks, with Karen desperately trying to claw her way out of the mess she had created. But the weight of the truth was too much. The final day arrived, and as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict, my heart pounded in my chest. Everything rested on this moment. The judge's voice rang clear across the room as he declared the final decision. I won. Karen was found guilty of trespassing, property damage, and harassment. She was ordered to pay for the damages, a hefty sum that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Her actions were labeled unjustifiable, and the ruling made it clear. She had abused her position and now had to face the consequences. Relief flooded over me as the weight of months of stress lifted from my shoulders. I had stood my ground and justice had been served. But the best part, the fallout was just beginning for Karen. The once feared HOA president had been publicly exposed, her reputation in ruins. Members of the HOA who once stood by her were now distancing themselves, unwilling to be dragged down with her sinking ship. The final blow came when the HOA board called an emergency vote, removing Karen from her position as president. Without her title, she was powerless. The woman who had once dictated every aspect of the community was now nothing more than a disgraced homeowner, and the humiliation didn't end there. A few weeks later, Karen quietly sold her house and left town. She had lost everything. As I watched her storm out of the courtroom that day, defeated and humiliated, I felt no anger, just satisfaction. She had tried to ruin my life, but in the end, she had only destroyed herself. Karma had done its job, and I could finally move forward, knowing that justice had been served. Rumor had it she tried to join another HOA in a different town, but her reputation followed her. She couldn't escape the mess she made. Meanwhile, my flower farm flourished. I expanded my business, hosted community events, and even had locals who once sided with Karen coming to buy my flowers. I put up a new sign at the edge of my property, Carter's Blooming Acres HOA Free Zone. Every time I see that sign, I smile. Because in the end, karma did exactly what it was supposed to. If you love this story of epic revenge and sweet justice, smash that like button, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Got your own crazy HOA story? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And trust me, you won't want to miss the next one, because if you thought this was wild, wait till you hear the next tale.